So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Alison Watson, if you can please join us. Alison is widely recognized educator and social entrepreneur, known for her pioneering work in promoting STEM education and sustainability in the construction industry. As the founder and CEO of Class of Your Own, a social enterprise focused on delivering high-quality STEM education programs, Alison has inspired thousands of students to pursue careers in the construction and engineering fields. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. It's interesting when we're talking about data. I think there should be some kind of code of practice for the way we work with education. So Paul, I'll see you after class. Here's some interesting data, or did you knows? And you know this, I hope you know this. And if you don't know it, you should be very, very worried that you don't. So this whole thing for me around, kids will be studying for careers that they don't even know about. I think that's tosh, actually. I think they do know. I think they're out there because this is a fact. Okay, we know that we're all going to live in cities. I'm not, and I'm going to show you why later. But we need to be more sustainable. We need to be building loads of stuff, apart from the British government, because they're clearly not getting around to it very quickly. So maybe these kids are our answer to that. But either way, chances are we're going to need all these children in some form or other. Even if it's for our own mental health, we're going to need them in construction in the future. But this is the problem. This is where we are now. So the future, they'll get there, but this is where we are now. The lack of information, actually, in terms of how to be people like us in this room and how to look forward to the future and so on, and how to deal with data. This is the problem. Kids just don't know this stuff. And I was talking to my lovely friend in the army there at the back, and it's the same as, well, again, if you don't know what to do with yourself and you're probably, classed as, academically challenged, you might be a bricklayer or you might join the army. Again, more tosh, because actually the brightest people in the world are in the army, are they not? My dad was a bricklayer, so be careful there. But this is the issue. According to universities, they don't need to run courses, so they're collapsing the courses. It's a bit of a state of a mess. And actually, when we look at this, we've just done a report on some of the countries that we operate in. Now, that tiny island that is called the British Isles, it's probably our smallest market for a tiny social enterprise that was born out of the Northwest. Because actually, around the world, it's the same problem. There's an absolute apathy to this. It's somebody else's problem. Somebody else will deal with it. And the data tells us that actually it's all right because, kids are going to university. But actually, it is a global issue. So I'm going to flick through these slides because the meat of the stuff that I want to talk about is on its way. So I set up this program about 15 years ago to try and overcome these issues that, children did have a pathway directly from 11 years old when they start to form those first impressions of academically what they're going to do. And the fact that they leave primary school with all that holistic information and that holistic knowledge that feeds around one classroom and many subjects, that goes from many subjects, and they're moving in these silos. So how do we bring it all together? And the one thing I've always said with STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, is that we do it better than anybody else in the built environment. It's everywhere. You can look around this room and see it. So the whole thing for me has been about developing teachers. Teachers are absolutely our greatest ambassadors. They're the best ambassadors for what you do and for what you want to promote. Tell a teacher will tell 1,000 children. So it's not rocket science. So we've worked in this area, this field for many years now. And even this, I'm a surveyor. I'm interested in data. I'm interested in information. We pick it up off the ground and we do things with it. And other people take our data and again, deliver their buildings or deliver their infrastructure. But the whole thing around sustainability, we actually started with an eco classroom, just a very, very small thing, because children at the time were being asked to, I think I've skipped one there. Children at the time were being asked to comment on massive school programs back when I was surveying in schools. And I think it's just too big. It's just too unwieldy. That amount of information that is in a large school building, children just can't process that, never mind process a career. We do an awful lot of work with the NHS at the moment. And again, that sort of information that children need to design a net zero neonatal unit. Net zero is absolutely where we're at the moment. But you try to design with net zero in mind and do a very, very clinical, warm environment where there are no windows. You're probably not going to hit net zero. It's very complex. And yet children are coming up with some amazing ideas as young as 13 on how they could overcome those problems. And similarly with the ambulance station of the future, how is an ambulance going to go from A to B reliant on, having that battery that isn't even made here now? And, how is an ambulance going to get from one side of London to the other through all that traffic and keep going? So there's some great opportunities for kids to learn. And over the years, we've looked at all different scenarios, from stadiums becoming refuge centres to the whole thing around designing your own student accommodation, off-site manufacture. This is 12 and 13 years old and so on. We do work experiences for the government, and ironically, the government asked us to do this because the government can't recruit now into property. So this whole irony of government actually preventing a lot of this really, really exciting stuff to be explored in the classroom is quite frustrating. And then we've got a whole pathway that goes right through from level 1 to 2 to 3. Level 1's going to be working in prisons now. I've kind of argued, why are we just giving offenders a paintbrush? We could be training them in digital applications and data collection. Some of them are in there for that in the first place. And again, with future infrastructure, where is infrastructure going to be in years to come? This stuff, these themes, digital intelligence, cybersecurity, asset management, leadership, these are all things that our 16-year-olds are learning around now. So this is their world. So this was the question that we first asked. When I was surveying on building schools for the future, I kept saying, but imagine if children designed a school, how much different would it be? And similarly with infrastructure, if you are designing infrastructure and you are 12, you're not thinking about a car because you can't drive one, and you can't drive one and probably can't even afford one for many years to come. So if you look through the lens of children who can walk, who might use a wheelchair, who might use a bicycle, that's the narrative that we have with children. So if children design schools, they come about it in a completely different way, especially around climate change and the environment, because they're all activists. In their little heart of hearts, they're all activists, but they don't necessarily know where to apply that knowledge. And of course, they could be applying it in their own environments, never mind looking at the rainforest, right here in a village like mine. So we're bringing it home. This is where I live. Now everybody knows I live in a tiny village in Lancashire called Sabden. And Sabden's an old cotton village. And here there is a lovely church. And these themes that you see in the middle, upsy daisy, can I close that down? I've got something on my screen. So these themes that you see in the middle is how we started with an eco classroom, because we basically said to children that in your community, people don't know about the sustainable approach to all these things: food and drink, waste management, water, travel and transport, etc. And in my village, there is a lovely church. It's not really very well used at the moment. And in fact, probably 30 people go on a Sunday. And then people might get married there or have their babies baptized there, or indeed, sadly, go to funerals there. There's a very active graveyard at the moment. This church suddenly has a different purpose. Otherwise, it's going to close. This church is full of dry rot. It needs about £250,000 spending on it. But you can't justify £250,000 for the 30 parishioners who go there on a Sunday. So I actually talked to the vicar recently. And I talked to him about community use, because actually this community has a lot going for it. We've got farmers, it's a very, very much a rural community now. So we actually talked to some friends of ours and said, look, this church could be a centre for sustainability. Because if we are going to be sustainable and we're not going to gravitate to a city in 2050, because not many of us want to do, we quite like being in the countryside, but there is a degree of isolation. There is an issue with energy use. We're all very, very worried in the cities and the villages about our energy. So what could we do about that? So brought in a whole load of school children and surveyors. And I just want to point it out, this young man was a plumber up until I got hold of him last Christmas, and is now trained to be a land surveyor. He didn't know about land surveying. So Alfie is now training, and he's training with Site Surveying Services, which is the local surveyors that I used to work with, and Alder Grange School just over the hill. And we are actually going to drive a smart village. So I'm just going to play this little video. We're going to be using a piece of effectively open source software. This is usually used for major planning in towns. It's now going to be used in a village. And with a bit of luck, this will play. Thank you, Ian. So we're basically going to work with the A-level class that we run in Alder Grange School, and we're going to use all these features, all these functionality to actually visualize the future of our village in 10 years' time. And there's a lot of interesting data that can come out of that, because working with the primary school children who will have a view, working with mums and dads who complain about all the teenagers and litter and so on and so forth, it'll be interesting as to how people in this community actually put in the information that they want to see that will change the future of a village. And if you imagine, our village is probably 1,600 people, so not a small village by any means. It's about 3 square kilometres. And I know there's a lot of irritating people at the moment who have issues, particularly with the way that towns are growing and house building is going on and so on and so forth, and the actual removal of farmland for house building. It's been going on massively in Clitheroe over the hill. So imagine all the things that we could use an eco-classroom, i.e. a church, and think about that smart technology and smart information. The fact that our doctors only allow half the time now to get an appointment in. In Sabden, we were very lucky. We could get an appointment same day, and now we can't get an appointment same week, and sometimes even same month. We think about food and growing. You know, since COVID, Tesco comes in, Asda comes in, and yet the farmers are growing local foods. They're having to change the way they farm, because unfortunately people aren't using local produce anymore. The whole thing around food sustainability and buying in season. We buy what we want when we want because we just click online. But the whole thing around looking after our local community and loneliness. We have a lot of elderly people in the village. There is a sort of an old people's centre down the road from where I live. They don't turn their heaters on in winter because they're frightened of the cost of energy. And similarly, in terms of defibrillators and people using defibrillators, you look if they even know where it is, never mind how to use one. So imagine if we can actually reach out to the community through the children and say, okay, using that piece of software, let's put that data in. What do you know? Doing a survey to the villagers. What do you know about health? What do you know about community? Who lives next door? Who is on their own? Because sadly, even in my road, there are about 20 houses on my lane, and I don't know somebody 8 doors down. And yet we're a village. We're supposed to be very, very insular, and yet not at all. We have farmers. This young man, Edward Gill, he sells raw milk straight from the cow. It has huge health benefits, apparently, raw milk, and yet people don't know he exists in the village. They come from all the way from Bolton, but they don't even know in the village that this exists. So actually putting health benefits, and indeed even looking at energy. We're surveying at the moment in the field next door to put geothermal energy in to power not only the church and the church hall and the church vicarage, but also the small housing estates that sits right across the other side of the field. And similarly with solar, you know, there's an awful lot of farms at the moment using solar energy in their fields rather than cows. They're getting a better return on investment. You've got the whole thing about NIMBYism there. Do people want to have solar panels in their backyards, in their lovely walks up to the reservoir that is near us? And the answer is no, until they think about how they can save money on their bills. And suddenly that whole societal, environmental consideration becomes about, you know, I don't want to look at solar panels, or do I? So that, and the whole ethics of solar panels, is it even clean? Do people know actually how dirty solar energy is in terms of mining? So you get that whole ethical response. It's a whole education. Mapping data in, so thinking about future of our village. It's a rat run from Burnley to Clitheroe. And at the moment, And indeed, for the past 30 years that I can remember having lived there, there's always been an issue of that main road. And one of these days, one of these children is going to die. And it's a very, very real problem. We've had quite a few near misses. We've had the police in with the speed guns. We've trained local people to use speed guns. We've talked about speed humps. We've put 20 mile an hour or campaigned for 20 mile an hour. It still doesn't stop it. And yet, imagine if you had autonomous vehicles and you can slow them down before they even come to the village or even keep them out. And these are the kind of arguments and issues that people have that children can actually deal with and look to the future when they actually become the adults of the village. So all this we can map as well. Where are the hotspots? Where are the issues? Even with history, we've surveyed the church. I mentioned there's a graveyard in there. So the primary school children are going to come in and do some land surveying. We're doing land surveying on the 20th of July, the last day of the school term, and we're going to map, not only geolocate where all the gravestones are, but actually talk about history, upload the data of the history. So every primary school child will basically take over a grave, research the history, a little bit of ancestry going on in our village, and upload that data. Because a lot of people come to Sabden from America, from when they emigrated in the sort of, the families emigrated in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they come back to Sabden to find out their history. Imagine they wouldn't have to travel that far. It's lovely that they can, but imagine if they could just access that data. And imagine if that data came from primary school children, the power that children can have in gathering that information. Biodiversity, we know it's in decline a lot of the times. Let's do a biodiversity study of not only the churchyard, but also the village. We have salmon in the river. We have these, can't remember the name of these little spiders, but apparently these only exist in Lancashire. Let's map where they are. Let's look at endangered species and let's look at the way that we treat them. So there's lots and lots of opportunities here, but I always come back to intelligence and that bright young thing who is going to go into the built environment or not because he's not good enough at maths or she's not good enough for maths. The capacity for helping children understand mathematics through all the geospatial activity, through all the data gathering is colossal. So I actually do think that we can overcome some of these massive issues. 250,000 people, children, enter secondary school without basic maths. I think we can do an awful lot of data sharing, data gathering. So there's this whole scheme about to start. We actually kick off on the 12th of June, so it's really, really exciting times. I'm proud as anything that my lovely friend Ian is going to be part of this journey. So where does it start and where does this all weave into the digital twin? Well, we alluded to the Isle of Wight earlier on today and what's going on in there. So I think it's over to Ian to give you a little bit of insight of where it all starts and where it can all continue.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alison. We'll drag you back in a few seconds to thank you very much as well again. So don't go away because I might need to interrupt you again. So I was really excited when I was hearing about Alison and the fact that the deck world to me was moving away from what I would call a pretty picture, a 3D pretty picture or building something, but into the information world. Because to me, information is the power of that, and then connecting information to make good decisions, even more so. So, what did I want to do? We wanted to bring together a challenge for the schools on the Isle of Wight, and we wanted it to involve information. We wanted it to involve the National Digital Twin Programme. I particularly enjoy the resilience world and the critical national infrastructure world and the disaster humanitarian aid, disaster relief world. And so we came up with a very exciting challenge for the kids in the island and Hampshire. So the actual picture on here is relevant. We're not going to bomb Newport. So don't worry, okay? We're just going to pretend. So what are we doing? Right, okay. So on the 3rd and 4th of October on the Isle of Wight, we're going to have teams of students come into a central location. It's going to be based around a real life scenario. They're going to be given a good part of the day to discover information about the area. Because I'm not going to give you the area just in case you slip out and tell them exactly where they need to study. But the scenario is that there's a construction site on the Isle of Wight within Newport. Okay, I'm not going to tell you where. During the construction, they find an unexploded World War II bomb. Bit like they did in Yarmouth last year. Okay, that bomb is going to cause disruption because people need to be evacuated. So therefore, the students need to understand and identify all the infrastructure that's going to be impacted, but not only the infrastructure, but also the people side, the social side, the society side. They're going to understand which people need to be evacuated. We've got vulnerable people within that environment. We've got emergency services, we've got food, we've got medical, we've got all sorts of things within that environment. But at the same time, you've got transportation nodes going through, you've got power, you've got water, you've got communications. They're all going through the central area. So they've got to map these things out and identify what they are, work out the networks exactly how I did over those 5 days. Whereas it was just me on my own for 5 days. They've got 1 day, but they've got a team of 5 people. So I think they're going to go quite well. Then they're going to be able to assess that and plan what they're going to do. Halfway through the scenario changes. Guess what happened in Newport? Boom. Okay, scenario changes. It's going to build up more. They've got to work out different plans. They've got to react to those plans. And then at the end, on the 4th of October, they're going to have to present back to a panel of experts all the information that they have gathered, all the decisions that they've made, how they made those decisions, and then prizes and victory will ensue. So it's a bit of excitement, but it's all around information. It's interconnected information. It's about infrastructure. It's about children learning new software, new skills, understanding new things, and it's going to be quite good fun. But I need some people to help me. Okay. During the day, I need some phone a friends. I've got some of the Royal Engineers there at the day. Okay, people who are experts in power networks and water networks. Okay, but if you've got people who know these things and are available into a Teams call for the day, that I can go, or you need to talk to a communications expert, somebody who understands how the telecom network works, well, not a problem. We can phone Andrew, okay? He'll be able to tell them. The kids can phone you up just for half an hour and go, help, how do we do this? And you can give them some help. I also need some tech companies that feel that you can add to that day. I've got some interesting people. You see that Topcon are going to help us do some scanning. We've got a company that are going to do some 3D printing of the area itself of that model. We've got the Bentley guys doing the kind of GIS-y type bit. Yeah, just get involved. It's good fun. And obviously I want to do some prizes. So anybody wants to sponsor a prize, come to the Isle of Wight, get on the hovercraft. I can tell you it's worth every penny. So exciting. And then come over to Newport, spend the day with some incredible, I want to call them kids, but they're not. They are young engineers. They are people who are going to be the future of what we are. And then come and join us for that couple of days and give us a hand delivering something really, really special. So sorry I've taken up probably a little bit more time than I should have. And I've also taken the end of Alison's presentation, but I am in awe of what she does. And I wanted to do something exciting to help forward that. So thank you very much to Alison for the presentation.
Thank you.